we do not have to carry the entire world in our mind in order to be a good person. We can be informed and still protect our attention to where we spend boundaries, and having honesty with the kids without feeding them fear is key. Welcome back to another episode of Integrated Being. Start, I guess, with honesty. I'm not at my best right now. I'm trying to really pull through an illness and my energy's low. And I thought, wonder what I would create or what I want to say during this time. I definitely feel like my system's been like running in the background for a long time, which is kinds of happen every end of the year. So on top of this like physical exhaustion, there's definitely this emotional exhaustion. So it's like a double whammy. That kind I really think is coming from looking around at the world and feeling confused and worried and really just tired of the constant brain somersaults about what is true, what is not, what does it all mean for most importantly for our kids. But so if you're sitting in that space, I figured if I'm sitting in it, I'm not alone. And so why not reach out on this monthly podcast just to talk about a particular heaviness that really I think comes with being, if you are, I mean, you always are for yourself, but an emotional container for those that are around you and that you hold near and dear. But, the one who's trying to keep the temperature steady in the home, the one who worries about how the older kids are interpreting everything that's happening, how the younger kids are absorbing, even when you think they're not even paying attention. So it's really the desire to want to raise thoughtful humans without making them fearful humans. So I guess I wanted to really just share and offer something practical that I find myself moving through. Not a debate or anything, just a steadier center is my goal. And I think, tying it back to those that have come before, this is wisdom from the Stoics. It's not really this idea of a rigid philosophy, but it helps set handrails when you're kind of walking on shaky ground. So I was thinking, really focus today on what is the difference between what is yours to carry and what is not. Second is how to work with your mind when it spirals for all you overthinkers. And then third, what small steps help not only you show up, but show up your kids, your loved ones, yourself, while you may be, in this space of just feeling the weight of it all. So, I think it's a very simple idea is the ability to separate what you can control from what you cannot. You cannot control the existence of current events. You cannot control the speed of the information. You cannot control other people's beliefs or the algorithms or the volume of the noise that's happening. But you can, this is more for me, I guess, but can control what you give your attention to. You can control how one speaks at the dinner table. You can control really the tone that you bring into the home, and also know that when mistakes happen, you can control, your next choice. And I think it's not maybe where I sit, it's not about being indifferent. It's really finding that clarity, especially when I'm low, I notice I start trying to do the impossible, start to try to create a system or solve all of the issues and really predict outcomes. I think it's what I've been known to be told, a fixer. But my job is not to fix everything. My job is to be faithful to the next right thing. And so, is this a set of virtues? I think that's what the Stoic calls it. Integrity. It's just really that quiet decision to respond to your values. And the first step is knowing and understanding your values, and then really not to panic, I guess, through. That's the goal, through it all. So here's a question you can ask yourself when emotional load feels too heavy. Is this mine to carry? If the answer is no, release it not because you do not care, because carrying it when it's not yours will make really you less effective at what is yours. Kind of like that idea, if you're trying to fix all, you fix none. But if you try to fix one, you fix it. So if the answer though is yes, carry it in a very manageable way. Have grace. One conversation, one act of care, 1 hour of a rest for yourself. So there's that. The other area, and I guess this kind of leads to it, is how to work your mind when it spirals for all my overthinkers. It's really another practice, learning to notice your impressions. Impression is the first story that your brain tells you when you see something upsetting, when you see an indignant look, or you see someone share snide comments. It's fast, it's emotional, it's often dramatic. You may take action that you're not proud of. So it's, again, the Stoics, or whoever you want to call it, ancient philosophy taught that you do not have to accept the first impression as truth. You can pause and examine it. You can offer in real time, I'm having a thought that what occurs, I'm noticing my body feel. What do I actually know right now? Which is really hard to do in the crux of like a moment of, real time exchange, especially with, loved ones where you don't always have your guard up, maybe as you do in a professional environment. But I think that short sequence creates this space between the stimulus and the response. I remember, Finley just days ago was just, and I just grabbed his little cheeks and I said, "You are safe." And I was like, "Your amygdala wants you to respond, but really tap into it." And I tapped his brain and he just laughed like I was goofy. But, that's really what we need to tell ourselves, especially as adults. And I think in other areas is, this whole finding yourself in, a space of numbness. It's like too much, that's often you responding in a protective way and your system is overloaded. So just being aware of it is your body, your system, your thoughts, your essence is asking you for less input and more rest. It's not to forget about it, but just knowing in those moments. It's not to force yourself to care harder and then, that's spiraling becomes. So like, for instance, you're allowed to reduce your news intake. You're allowed to stop doom scrolling, which, by the way, I have this app. It's been amazing. Clear Space, Open Space. Now I need to look it up. But it more or less locks your clear space. It locks the apps on your phone. But it also allows you to set limits. I think, maybe it was the practicality of this app that's really tied to what I want to share today. But you are allowed to protect your attention. It's not avoidance. I think if anything, it's stewardship. It's believing in taking ground. So if you want to be calm and wise, especially for those that are observing you, you cannot feed your nervous system in a constant state of alarm. So I guess, going through what I've, been championing, just, I would say my immunity system's down and kind of the coming off of all of the pressures of the end of the year. It's, what are some small steps to keep your home steady, especially if you're the one, holding that, or when the world feels unstable, or maybe your body feels unstable, is really name your lane out loud. Let those around you understand where you are physically, emotionally, mentally in a space of love and kindness. And so don't be afraid to share, I guess. And then, especially those with little ones around, is teach children or whoever the difference between facts and untruths, separating what happened from what people are saying about what happened. Start to train discernment. So that could be really mean a lot right now in the environment we're in, but just, in one's feelings of maybe a physical ailment, just understanding what is being said and what is the actual truth. And then really creating and just taking the steps to get back to that familiar rhythm. So, you may not be able to be present wholly, but just pick, 1 or 2 anchors that, honestly just finds your ground, such as nurturing a real breakfast or prompting an after school walk, just anything to really lower the temperature to bring back normalcy. And then also, this is more for really maybe adults, but kids, is the idea of using language such as, if, you're in an environment that you're being imposed upon with information and one's desiring is like trying, I'm still learning. I don't know enough yet to have an opinion. I'm going to wait for more information. using those words yourself helps children themselves use their words. And then also, lastly, especially if you're feeling physically ill or just emotionally heavy, is remember your body needs rest. I knew the answer, but just a quick call from my mom, telling me that electrolytes are truly needed, taking a shower, taking a quick walk, really canceling all non-essentials is not weakness, it's wisdom of understanding, the larger. So here's what I want to just leave you with today. Thank you for listening. We do not have to carry the entire world in our mind in order to be a good person. We can be informed and still protect our attention to where we spend boundaries, and having honesty with the kids without feeding them fear is key. And also just to remember when feeling overwhelmed or under the weather, remember that you can come back to the ideas. What is within control today? What is the next right step? How do I want to show up here and now? Because your calmness and our calmness, it really becomes the climate for which our children and those that are watching grow up in. Well, with that, thank you so much for listening. And I look forward to continuing to share within this community and connecting the dots and finding your joy, even through challenges and changes. Thank you. Until next time.